You're listening to the Geek Watch Podcast, Episode 23, The Return of Mokon, plus Avengers Infinity War.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 23 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hi, Brian.
We're back after a week's vacation.
We've had a great time, and I know it will surprise our listeners, but yes, I did dye my hair pink. I know you're all surprised by it.
You dyed part of it pink, so you didn't go completely rebel, so just enough so I guess they'll notice it at work. We're going to talk about Avengers Infinity War. We're not going to do like a blow-by-blow. I've seen a lot of these reviews where people just, for about 30 minutes, discuss what happens in the movie, which I'm not sure what the point of that is. You could just watch the movie.
Yeah.
But we are going to discuss our feelings about it, and we'll let you know when that happens because it's going to be huge spoilers. And I know there are still people who haven't seen it yet. I've had friends of mine on Facebook saying they're going to see it today. So there are definitely people who haven't caught it yet. And so if you're one of those people, when we mention it, and I'll bring it up again, when we start talking about it, just cut off the podcast, go watch the film. Go see it, and then you can come back and hear our views on that. But before we do that, the reason we didn't post a podcast last Saturday was because we were in Indianapolis for MoCon.
MoCon. And Brian, do you want to explain what MoCon is? Because I did not know, and it's not a very large con. While not being large, it's still, there's so much quality, not quantity, quality in this con.
Yeah, basically MoCon was created by a writer friend of mine, Maurice Broaddus, who wanted to talk about, when he started out, he's a horror writer, but he writes about race and gender and faith, which makes him not a typical horror writer. But he wanted a convention where writers could get together that could talk about those things that you don't always talk about in horror conventions. And so he created MoCon, and it was, I want to say, about 10 years ago? Well, it would have been 12 years ago because he skipped a couple of years. Mm-hmm. He did it for about 9 years, and then he said, this is getting to be too big for me. I'm going to step out from this. And so he quit doing MoCon. And then there was 1 year. And then the year after that, he's like, well, maybe I'll just invite people to my house and we'll hang out. Because one thing people who, if you don't know this about MoCon, you have the convention. It was held at a church or some other building. This year, a small venue. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, you'd always meet up at his house.
For the after party.
Instead
of like a regular con where they'd have it like a bar or...
Right, you just hang out at his house. Mm-hmm. Not to say there wasn't drinking going on, but you'd hang out in his garage or in his living room, hang out, talk to people. It's like I said in the last podcast, it's less of a convention, more like a family reunion.
When I had described it to people who have been to various gatherings like this, they said, well, that sounds more like a retreat. And I can see that. I can see this is like a con and a retreat had a baby, and that is MoCon, like art retreats. And so that's what it really reminded me of.
Yeah. And I teased him about this because I went to, we called it No-Con because he wasn't doing a convention. He was just having everybody kind of hang out.
Friends at his house.
And I looked at Maurice and I said, you realize you're going to be doing MoCon next year? And he's like, I'm not so sure about that. I'm like, no, you're going to have a weekend of hanging out with people and you're going to get the bug again. And that's exactly what happened. Got the bug. And so this year is the 10th MoCon. He'd stopped at 9 and he decided to start it up again this year. It took place this year at the most interesting building, I have to say. It's called Switchboard. And basically what Switchboard is, it is a community office. It's a place where people in the community can rent out space to work. It goes anywhere from like a table where you can just hook up your PC and work, and you can rent that out for a day or so. Or if you want to have like a full office, they have office space where you can, again, you can rent it out for a month or a year but you have a space that they take care of.
It's like a maker space for digital art. The building itself is really interesting. It's an interesting shape, and there are small sets of stairs and all these little rooms that just seemingly come out of nowhere. You turn a corner, and all of a sudden there's a large meeting room with like
Right.
10 chairs in it, just hiding.
It used to be a church. It was a church and a rectory, and they joined them both together and created this space. What I always enjoy is I always get a nice eclectic group of guests. You know, people from publishing, music. One thing that I wasn't aware of, and found this out on Friday, was that Indianapolis has a strong hip-hop scene. And I'm going to geek out here a little bit about hip-hop, so forgive me for this.
Nerd.
But the thing about hip-hop, if you don't know, hip-hop has always had a strong sense of place to it. It wasn't always just about the artist, but it was also about where they came from, their neighborhood, their city. From the beginning of hip-hop, you talked about Queens was always MC Shan, and Bronx, of course, you know, Boogie Down Productions, KRS-One, and you had that style. And then, of course, it travels over, you know, if you mention Compton, there's a Compton type of rap.
Okay, that sounds more familiar to me. Was
Compton,
that more
Compton's
of a
like
1990s?
Yes, the
okay.
West Coast. You know, you
West
had
Coast, East Coast.
you know
yes, those are the
NWA, Snoop Dogg. You know,
those are the things that I remember.
yeah.
From my
You know, well, Snoop Dogg was more Long Beach, but they remember him more of his working with Dr. Dre, who, of course, from NWA. And then, of course, you know, you have Nelly in Kansas City, and you got Eminem in Detroit. But there was every kind of a style of music. It was really tied to place. And they had an artist there performing on Friday, Diop, who was amazing. I never heard about him before.
Yeah.
The Indianapolis scene, if Diop is any indication about what it is, Indianapolis rappers have a strong sense of lyricism. The subjects they cover in their raps, very deep, very thoughtful. I was very impressed with Diop and his performance. And I found out that he has a song on the soundtrack for the Netflix series She's Gotta Have It, the Spike Lee series, which I'm guessing is based off of his movie. And I guess in episode 4, Diop has a track on the soundtrack, which I think is really awesome.
Very. And he was so good, and I would have liked to have got to speak to him, but he was on a tight schedule because the next day he was leaving for London.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was getting ready to
leave.
And I got to talk to him for just a minute, at least long enough to say, you know, I really liked your music and it was fantastic. But yeah, getting to hear him perform was really cool. And of course, over the weekend, we had little panels. They don't overrun you with panels because most of the time is really spent talking to each other,
yes.
You know, but they had some interesting panels. They had panels on writing people who are not like you. They had a nice panel on your art and what you should be charging for it and how much it's actually worth. The takeaway for me on that panel was people are not going to value your art more than you do yourself. At the beginning, you know, it's like if you don't value it that much, if you don't think it's worth that much, nobody else is going to. Somebody's not going to come by and validate you past the level that you tend to validate yourself. And I think that's something that as artists we tend to forget because we are looking for validations.
And what really seemed to be an ongoing theme of that panel was everyone who had these experiences, someone else was they had named a number, and everyone was telling them, you need to charge more.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone told them, you need to charge more for this.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, it's funny because what that reminded me of is a mentor of mine, Eugene Berger, passed away last year. He was talking about what you charge for performing, and he was on a bill with a bunch of different magicians. And he was in that situation where he asked for 3 figures. They told him, you need to ask for 4 figures, and found out that other people on the bill got paid 5 figures, and he would have been too if he'd have just asked for it.
Wow.
It's like everything else. It's like, what is something really worth? It's worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. And sometimes we do kind of undercut ourselves because artists as a whole, we tend to be very needy, and we have issues with gauging ourselves. Because the thing about it is this. Especially when you do art for money. When you look at that, it looks like it's the most egotistical thing ever because what you're basically saying is, what I do is so good, you should pay for the privilege of experiencing it. And there's something in our heads that rebels against just the thought of that. And so we very often just undercharge, and we want to do things for exposure because we're looking for that validation, and we think, hey, if we can just get our name out there and people can see our stuff, then we're on our way. And people die of exposure. So, and that was something that they really hit on too. But there was a lot of panels, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of hanging out with friends, old friends, making new friends, and there was food.
Lots of food.
Yeah.
Yes. The great stories about this weekend always come back to the food and how amazing it was.
Yeah,
I think we only had like 3 caterers all together, but we had it was a vast, we had everything. We had Louisianan food, we had Indian food, we had Italian food, we had so much delicious food.
Yeah, there was a ton of it. One of the caterers was Maurice's sister, and she and her husband, they have a charity that they run where they cook healthy food and take it into the inner city, where
the urban deserts.
Yeah,
I think they're called.
He calls them the urban deserts, and the reason they're called urban deserts is because these are places where there's no grocery
stores.
There's like no
liquor stores. That's all there are.
They're like liquor stores, and there's fast food, and that's about the extent of it. So they go in there with healthy home cooked food, so people have a healthy alternative. And I mean, it's good food. And the thing is, it's not like they're just giving them salad and tofu, and it's like that.
This is hearty meals.
Yeah, these are these are real meals, which I think is amazing. And she's an amazing cook. They made jerk chicken for us. The
etouffee.
Oh yes. There was so much just amazing food there. In fact, the food was so good that at the hotel we were staying, they had continental breakfast, and I don't think we had one. We didn't eat one continental breakfast because we were so full.
Also full, and also the after parties went late into the night, and I preferred sleeping in to going down to breakfast, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I can sleep right through that.
Well, that the funny thing too is that a lot of conventions, what they'll do is they'll start up like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 8 o'clock in the morning, and these are people who don't understand how conventions work. Maurice, who's quite the expert when it comes to going to conventions as well as running one, knows that we need to start around 10 or 11 when people actually wake up and want to be involved. So I've been to MoCon a couple of times, and I went to NoCon last year, and getting to go back again this year is always great because, especially when it comes to writing, you kind of forget that there are other people doing this. You're on an island by yourself. I mean, especially where I live. If I didn't travel, I would probably see other writers maybe once a year, and that's one person. Because a friend of mine, of course, Michael Nost, is a writer, and we get to kind of hang out. But I mean, being in the company of other writers, I don't have that benefit that a lot of other people do, where they have writers groups, or in Maurice's case, he has a lot of writers that live in that area, and so getting together is really important as an artist, to hang out with your own and kind of remember why it is you do what you do, and to have appreciation for it. And that's why, for me, I mean, MoCon is a big deal for me, and I'm glad that I was able to go this year, and I was glad that you came with me because, again, you got to make some new...
Yeah,
you had a good time. You got to make some new friends, and you got to kind of see a side of me that not a lot of my other friends get to see, because you get to see the writer side of me and get to meet some of my friends that don't come down here, and that is kind of a different situation. So with that said, we're going to spend a few moments talking about
the Avengers Infinity War.
And in case I forgot to mention this before, spoilers.
Now.
Tons and tons of spoilers. We're not going to, like I said, we're not going to do a play-by-play, beat-by-beat about what happened in the movie. But, Mandy, what did you think about it?
I'm satisfied with it. I went and I saw it with my sister, and she was very upset, and she's like, they have got to stop killing Groot. And and I know so many people were sad and upset by it, but in my mind, I know that this isn't the end. There's more to come. So I know this isn't the be-all, end-all. They can come back.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not Loki, but...
Although, I will say this. Somebody said they saw Loki... Tom Hiddleston on set for Avengers 4. They saw him filming something.
Okay.
Could be a flashback or whatever. Yeah. But we haven't seen the last of him. But yeah, they killed off Black Panther. because they were like, well, that last movie didn't do so well. They killed off Spider-Man, which I know that they talked to Sony, but there's a twisted part of me that kind of wishes that they hadn't done that. It would just have been so much fun for Sony to go, what are you doing? This is like the only successful movie we've had in forever. We let you use the character and you killed him off.
But some of my favorite interviews are Benedict Cumberbatch covering up Tom Holland's mouth every time he gets ready to do a spoiler. And I
Yeah.
learned on Ellen, Benedict Cumberbatch said he was the only cast member, this entire huge, massive cast, who got to read the script.
Yeah, I got-
and he said it makes sense because Doctor Strange is the one who saw all the outcomes. He saw
Right.
it. So it was good for him to read the whole script, and he said it was like under lock and key, and they had
Yeah.
had it in a vault, and someone with a briefcase and a handcuff attached to their arm came
Oh,
and
yeah.
got it and took it because
And then, yeah, they sat there while he read it, and then after he was done reading it, he gave it back to them. They walked out with it. Well, I get that because, I mean, there's all kinds of crazy spoilers, which is, of course, one of the reasons why, of course, we announced spoilers, because you don't want to be spoiled in any of this stuff. I mean, it's like one big spoiler. It's like one big thing after another over and over again. You got to say, though, about this movie, and we talked about this the last time, but man, you just have to mention Thanos. Oh my goodness. I mean, he probably one of the most fleshed out Marvel villains in the cinematic universe. I mean, this guy had depth. He had a reason for doing what he was doing, and he cried in the movie.
and it wasn't that he was trying to impress his girlfriend,
Yeah.
like in the comics, like
Yeah,
we've talked about over and over
yeah,
again.
I mean, I think in his situation, his motivations in the movie were better than his motivations in the comic book, and I think he's a more well drawn out character in the movie than he was in the comic. This is one of the situations where I have to say the book was better than the movie, or I should say, or the movie was better than the book.
Yes,
I say the movie.
we understood what you meant.
Yeah.
but yeah, Thanos, he was very population control. We need to spay and neuter our pets. You know,
But the thing about it was what he did it completely random. There wasn't people who could buy their way out of a situation. It wasn't, we're not going to get rid of the lower 99% and save the 1%. It's like rich, poor, wherever you're from. It was like even, it was fair, and he felt that it needed to be done. You had to prune the plant so that it could thrive and grow, and that was the way that it was.
We'll tell you something. In The Stand, the Stephen King book, they talk about that there are, when it comes to like the plague, there are 2 plagues, and this what kind of reminded me of that is that he killed off half of everyone,
Right.
gone, fly apart like leaves. Well, then comes all the people who die because of the car wrecks, because someone disappeared.
Right.
The airplane pilot disappeared. Now everyone on that
helicopter
plane, or
pilot,
the
yes.
helicopter pilot. So that's your second wave. So he actually was responsible for more deaths than just half the universe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it irons out to close enough to half, I suppose. It's still a horrible, horrible thing. Especially, there's probably trillions upon trillions, hundreds of trillions of lives in the universe.
So what I'm looking forward to in the next movies of what I think is going to happen, I haven't found anyone who has agreed with me yet. But I feel that because of this, that maybe we'll come back to his girlfriend, and that Death is going to come in and tell Thanos, you don't have control over this. You didn't think this through, and you don't have the right to choose who lives and who dies.
Yeah.
And then she can bring everyone back.
I mean, ultimately, I think that this movie and the next Avengers movie is going to be an arc for Thanos, because, and again, what makes him different is he has all this power, and what does he do with it? He does the one thing that he wanted to do, and then what's he do? He retires. He goes to the farm. That's basically it. He doesn't want to rule the universe. He's like, the universe has a problem. This is the way you have to fix it. I saw what happened to my own planet of Titan. They were all destroyed. The same thing's going to happen to the entire universe unless I do this. He gets the gems together. He creates the Infinity Gauntlet. He snaps his fingers. Half the universe is gone. And he's like, well, that's what I wanted to do. And he just goes off to the farm.
And I guess that's one of the reasons, like everyone talks about, oh, I can really, I can identify with Thanos. I can sympathize with him. I can't. Because, I mean, he's a great villain. But he wanted to fix this one problem.
Yeah.
Didn't think about the problems that he's creating.
Right.
And now we're going to have entire planets who have lost their leaders, who have lost the only people who knew how to do certain things, the only people with the codes to nuclear arms, the only people who were doctors. He's created all these other problems for the entire universe.
Right. Well, that's the problem with the zealot and the fascist. It's like that saying, when all you have is a hammer, every problem is a nail. Of course, Doctor Strange used the time gem in the Orb of Agamotto to look in the future and see how everything was going to happen. Not once did Thanos use the time gem to prove his thesis. Before he went to Earth and got the mind gem, he had the power to look into the future and see what would happen should he kill half the universe. He had the ability to do that and see if his plan worked, but he didn't even consider once to do that. That's his fatal flaw, is the fact that he was so driven that he was doing the right thing, that when he had the power to know 100%, when he could have looked into the future and saw for himself whether this would work or not, he didn't do it. It never occurred to him to do it. And so, to me, that's what makes him interesting as a character, is his true compassion and what he considers compassion, but being kind of blind, that his emotion blinded him to the fact that maybe his solution really isn't the best thing, and that there were better ways of fixing this problem than his solution to it. And maybe that's something that will continue in his arc in the next Avengers movie, perhaps. He'll get that opportunity to say, okay, I made a mistake. Maybe that'll happen. But we've got a year to wait before that to happen.
We've got more than a year, because we know that Captain Marvel's coming out in 2019.
Right. It's supposed to be coming out about the same time that Black Panther came out this year.
Okay.
And it was like a few weeks between Black Panther and Avengers.
And Avengers got an early opening.
Yeah. But it's going to be about the same amount of time, my understanding, between Captain Marvel and Avengers 4.
Okay.
Which we'll just go on a side. I'm just going to a side mention, is a sidebar on this, is what's really bad for DC because of that is, guess what they stuck dead in the middle of those two movies? Shazam.
Oh.
They should consider moving Shazam, I think. Especially with, I don't know how well Aquaman's going to do. Keep my fingers crossed. But Shazam is a popular character, but he's not a tier 1 character.
Right.
A lot of people my age remember watching live action Shazam show on Saturday morning, but I don't know if he's going to have the cachet that movie is going to be able to survive between really what's going to be two powerhouse films. Captain Marvel, who's going to be the first female Marvel superhero standalone film. And then, of course, Avengers 4. I don't know if Shazam, even if it's very popular, it's going to get the legs cut out from under it the minute that Avengers shows up. Avengers 4. So I don't know how well that's going to do. I have to think that Warner Brothers is going to move that movie to give it a better chance. And I think it makes sense. The thing about it is, most people want to release superhero movies in the spring because they seem to do so well in the spring. But it's because Marvel, they've been putting out successful movies and they've been putting them out in the spring. It kind of, it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, it's what came first, the chicken or the egg. So the question is then, what's Warner Brothers going to do? Are they going to think, well, the spring is just too good a time for superhero movies to move it, which I think is going to be a mistake, or are they going to move it? To be honest, if Marvel started releasing their films in the fall, then the fall would be the time when superhero movies do really well. So I just don't think that Shazam should stay where it is. It needs to be given a chance. And I don't think where it's sitting right now, it's going to get much of a chance. But I guess we'll find out when we find out if they move it or not. So definitely Avengers Infinity War has set up for the next movie. The next two Marvel movies that we're going to get, Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel, because of where they're set in time, the final events of Infinity War are not going to really play into it, although we might see an end credit scene at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp that's really depressing. Somebody might get ashed up. It probably won't be Ant-Man because he is showing up in Avengers 4. I don't know. They might ash the Wasp.
Wow.
It could happen. I don't know. But what I find so funny is, of course, we made our little predictions about this movie, and we were pretty much all wrong. Everybody was wrong. Nobody was right, because nobody expected, first of all, when they were talking about who's going to die, first of all, people thought, well, maybe 2 or 3 characters, a lot more than that. And it was going to be either Captain America, Iron Man, or the both of them, and they both wind up surviving. And nobody thought they were going to kill off Spider-Man, and they did. Nobody...
Or Black Panther. There was just nothing. There's I don't even.
Yeah, when Black Panther died, here's what's funny.
Are you sure?
Here's the funny thing about that to me is that that gave me more hope. If they would have killed off a couple of characters, and they teased killing off Iron Man because he got stabbed. Yeah. But the thing about it is, when they killed off all these characters, including Black Panther, in a sense that
Whose franchises just started.
they started, and there's a Spider-Man 2 coming. You know that they're going to do a second Black Panther. You know they're not leaving these characters dead. And so in a weird way, by being that depressing, they actually became more hopeful.
Right.
Because they're not going to keep them dead. But at the same time, it was like rough to watch. And here's the other thing too. I don't know if you know this or not, but the scene of Tom Holland when he dies, when Peter Parker dies, Tom Holland ad-libbed the whole thing. All they told him was, you're dying, you don't want to go. Go for it. And then he turns into the 10th Doctor.
Yes.
Well, he's British, so it makes a sense. Well, what would I do in this situation? What would David Tennant do in this situation? He said, I don't want to go.
And you know what Groot said to Rocket, right?
Yes, I...
Oh,
go ahead and tell. Go ahead and tell him.
When Groot says, I am Groot, as he's ashing away, as he's talking to Rocket, he says, Dad?
Yeah.
Oh,
oh Lord. Yeah. It basically it just constantly is just kicking you in the
feels.
In the feels junk. Kicking your feels right in the junk. That's what it's doing the whole time. But I do have to say, I'm also really excited to see what happens from this point on, because they have set up something huge.
And maybe Shuri will have to take on the mantle of Black Panther.
If she's alive.
We didn't see.
We didn't see what happened to her. So I don't know. There might be other casualties we don't know about when we get to the end, but hopefully Shuri's still around, because they're going to need her.
So, yes.
They're going to need her. If we've learned anything from Infinity War, it's whatever you think's going to happen, just wait. You're going to be in for a surprise. Definitely. So, again, I don't know what's going to happen, but we've got a couple of movies coming up. We've got Ant-Man and the Wasp. It looks like it's going to be a nice palate cleanser to all this depression. Maybe up till the very end and something happens. And then we've got Captain Marvel, which I'm really, really looking forward to.
Yes.
Because, again, Captain Marvel is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful character in the Marvel universe, and certainly in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She is not to be messed with. And I think she's going to play a huge role in what happens in the next Avengers film. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
We shall see.
And so with that being said, that'll come to the end of this week's episode. Of course, we'll have a lot more things to talk about. We haven't had a chance to watch Batman Ninja yet, but I think that's coming out on Blu-ray. It should be out by now. I'm waiting for my copy to come in, so maybe we can talk about that next week or the week after. And there's certainly a lot of geek stuff that's going to be going on. And as it happens, we'll talk to you guys about it, the Geek Watchers. And so until next time, for Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher reminding you that we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.